Some battles begin with fists. Mine started with filet mignon and imported chocolate. I didn't expect my peaceful Thursday evening to turn into a showdown with the HOA, or with a woman who'd later try to rewrite reality itself. My name is Desmond Powell. After 5 years of hard work at Caldwell & Reed as a senior financial analyst, I was finally ahead of schedule on my 10-year plan. That Thursday in April had been a personal victory. I just closed a multi-million-dollar portfolio deal, even made stone-faced Mr. Caldwell smile during the board presentation. That alone was worth a toast. To celebrate, I stopped by Meriden Market, not my usual store, but the upscale place where they keep the good stuff. I loaded up, hand-cut ribeyes, fresh asparagus, those Belgian truffles I'd been eyeing, and a bottle of Macallan 18 that had waited too long on my shelf. 6 grocery bags in total. Just enough for a quiet, well-earned evening. I pulled my Audi Q5 into the driveway of 122 Elmhurst Lane, a modest but proud 3-bedroom I'd purchased almost a year ago in the Greystone View neighborhood. The air was crisp, leaves gently rustling on the maples. I popped the trunk and started unloading the bags when I heard it, sharp and shrill, like a rusty nail dragged across glass. "Excuse me. What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned, startled, 2 grocery bags in hand. A woman I'd never seen before was stomping across my lawn. Late 50s, bottle blonde ponytail pulled so tight it looked painful, pink velour tracksuit, and a trembling little dog tucked under one arm that barked like a malfunctioning smoke detector. "I'm sorry," I said, blinking at her. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "I've been watching you. You don't live here." "That's Julie's house." I stared at her, stunned. "Ma'am, this is my house. I've lived here for nearly a year." "No. This is Julie Thornton's home, and she's in Phoenix visiting her sister." "I know because I'm her friend," she declared, hugging her yapping dog like a hostage. I took a deep breath. I'd heard of these stories. I just never thought I'd be in one. "Again, I'm Desmond Powell. This is my house. I bought it from the Crawfords last June." She scowled. "You people think you can just waltz into quiet neighborhoods like this and there it was." The unspoken truth, finally peeking out from behind a fake smile and passive-aggressive concern. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." In that moment, I had a choice: retreat inside and hope the officers were reasonable, or stay right there and record everything. I chose the latter. Calmly, I said, "You're free to call. I'll be right here, bringing in my groceries. The ones I paid for." As she barked into the phone, reporting a large black man breaking into a house, I realized this wasn't about groceries. It was about the color of my skin, the car I drove, and a neighborhood that still had fences, just invisible ones. And this? This was only the beginning. There's something surreal about standing on your own porch, holding your own groceries, and being told you're a criminal. But that's exactly what was happening. As I stood firm on the steps of my home, my house at 122 Elmhurst Lane, the woman, who I would later learn was named Karen Hollingsworth, paced the sidewalk, waiting for police to arrive like she was monitoring a hostage situation. Her little dog hadn't stopped barking since she walked up, and her eyes never left me. The groceries I'd left near the front door sat like silent witnesses to the absurdity. From the moment she called 911, Karen had shifted from passive-aggressive neighbor to self-proclaimed neighborhood savior. She told the dispatcher, loud enough for me to hear, that I was a large black man in a suit stealing groceries and trying to break into a home that clearly isn't his. She described me like I was an armed suspect. She used that honeyed voice, the one racists often use when pretending to be calm while lighting the match. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't just wrong. She was confidently wrong, building a reality as she went and dragging law enforcement into her fantasy. I sighed, unlocked my phone, and hit record. If things went sideways, I needed documentation. Across the street, the Bennetts, Robert and Claire, had emerged onto their porch. Robert wore his usual weekend uniform, golf polo and jeans. Claire was still in her work scrubs. They looked confused at first, then alarmed. Robert called out, "Everything okay over there, Desmond?" "Not really," I replied, still keeping my voice calm. "Apparently, I'm breaking into my own house and stealing groceries." Robert and Claire immediately crossed the street, their expressions hardening as they took in Karen, her phone call, and my half-unpacked bags on the porch. "Karen," Claire said sharply. "What are you doing?" "I'm protecting this neighborhood," Karen snapped. "This man is breaking into Julie Thornton's house." Claire blinked. "Julie Thornton from the Garden Club? She lives on Maple Street. And she moved into a retirement home 2 years ago." "Not that Julie," Karen insisted, jabbing a finger at my house. "This Julie lives here." Robert's voice dropped an octave. "Karen, this is Desmond's house. He's lived here since last summer. You met him at our Labor Day barbecue, remember?" Karen's lips twisted into something between a pout and a snarl. "I don't recall." That's when her dog made its move. It wriggled free from her arms, dashed across my lawn, and launched itself at one of the grocery bags. In seconds, a package of ribeyes rolled out onto the welcome mat. Karen pointed like she'd caught me red-handed. "See? Those are Julie's steaks. Premium ribeyes, she buys them every week." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. How did she plan to prove that steaks I had just bought were someone else's? "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "What I think," I said, raising my phone to ensure she was in the frame, "is that you saw a black man in a suit unloading groceries from a luxury car in this neighborhood, and your first instinct was, he doesn't belong here. So you invented a fake homeowner and called the police." Karen gasped. "How dare you accuse me of racism? Some of my best friends are black." I finished for her, eyebrows raised. Before she could respond, sirens echoed in the distance. My stomach tightened. Here's what people don't understand unless they've lived it: even when you've done everything right, even when you're calm and cooperative and have proof of everything, the arrival of police when you're a black man in America isn't just stressful, it's dangerous. That's not paranoia. That's history. "Robert," I said quietly. "Would you mind sticking around?" He nodded instantly. "We're not going anywhere." The squad car pulled up to the curb, lights still flashing. 2 officers stepped out. One was young and pale, face barely out of the academy. The other was older, black, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. His nameplate read, "Officer J. Washington." Karen rushed to them like a contestant on a game show, arms waving. "That's him," she declared, pointing at me like I was a fugitive. "He's the one breaking in and stealing groceries." Officer Washington approached, voice calm. "Sir, may I see some identification?" "Of course, officer," I replied, deliberately slow in reaching for my wallet. "My name is Desmond Powell. I live here. I was bringing in groceries when this woman accused me of theft." I handed him my license, clearly displaying my name and my address, 122 Elmhurst Lane. I also showed him my key, my mortgage statement, I kept a copy in the foyer, and the grocery receipt with today's date and timestamp. The younger officer, Officer Miller, stood off to the side, scanning the bags. His face showed dawning discomfort. Officer Washington reviewed everything, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this all appears to be in order." Karen's face twisted. "You're just taking his word for it? He could have forged everything. This house belongs to Julie Thornton." "Karen," Claire said again, this time more firmly. "Julie never lived here. The Crawfords did. Before that, the McDaniels. There's never been a Julie Thornton on this street. Karen looked around, eyes darting like a cornered animal. You're all in on it, she hissed. This whole neighborhood, this is a conspiracy. I turned to Officer Washington. I'd like to file a report for harassment and making a false police call. She's endangered me, insulted me, and disturbed the peace. Karen's eyes widened. I'm the victim here. The officer sighed. Sir, we'll finish verifying your residency. Then we can discuss next steps. He followed me inside. I opened the door to my home, my safe space, and gestured to the living room. Clean lines, cool grays and blues, a baby grand piano in the corner. Family photos on the mantel. Jazz album covers on the wall. Officer Washington looked around, his expression softening. You play? He asked, nodding toward the piano. Since I was 6, I replied. Helps me decompress. I retrieved my utility bills, property tax documents, and closing paperwork from the home office. By the time we stepped back outside, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors watching from lawns and porches. Karen was still arguing with Officer Miller. Mrs. Garcia from 2 doors down had her phone out, recording. The Johnson twins were openly laughing. Officer Washington raised his voice. I've seen enough to confirm this man lives here and owns the property. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, this appears to be a misunderstanding. Karen looked like she might combust. No. Julie never told me she moved out. This is her house. It never was, Claire Bennett said flatly. You need to stop, Karen. Karen stumbled for a response. I made a mistake. I just wanted to keep the neighborhood safe. You made a false report, Officer Washington said. And that is a crime. Karen froze. Then I spoke. Officer. I don't want to press charges. Not yet. Karen's face twitched. Hope? Suspicion? Hard to say. I'd prefer an alternative, I continued. Something that actually benefits this community she claims to care so much about. Officer Washington raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? And that's when everything started to change. Because in that moment, I decided I wasn't going to let her hate define the night. I was going to rewrite the ending. Not just for me. For all of us. There are moments when time doesn't just slow down, it crystallizes. The moment Officer Washington stepped into my house, that's exactly what happened. He didn't say anything right away. Just scanned the room, the framed family photos, the polished baby grand piano in the corner, the meticulous layout of furniture, art, and personal artifacts that made this space undeniably mine. There was no mistaking it, this was my home. This yours? He finally asked, nodding toward the piano. Yes, sir, I said, closing the folder containing my mortgage paperwork. First thing I bought with my first bonus. Well, the first big thing. His eyes flicked toward the wall where a trio of framed vinyls, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, and Coltrane, hung in perfect harmony above the fireplace. You play? Since I was 6, I said. Helps me think. He gave a small nod. Nice taste. We returned to the porch. Outside, the situation hadn't calmed, it had simply become louder. Karen's voice echoed through the front yard like a megaphone. He's lying. This is Julie's house. I've walked her dog right there on that porch. Officer Miller stood with arms crossed, trying to talk her down, but Karen was in full flight mode, just not the kind that actually flees. As Officer Washington stepped outside, I glanced at the growing crowd of neighbors. A dozen people now. Maybe more. Mr. Halverson from next door. Mrs. Garcia from 2 doors down. The Johnson twins perched on their bikes. Even Aidan, the shy high schooler from the corner house, was watching with a half-curious, half-horrified expression. Robert and Claire stood nearby, arms folded protectively across their chests. And the stakes? Still there, now joined by a bottle of olive oil that had toppled out of another grocery bag in the commotion. Karen eyed the spilled items with renewed zeal. See? Imported olive oil. That's exactly what Julie buys. This proves he's lying. Officer Washington approached her slowly, like one might approach a stray cat that's too angry to run but too scared to stay still. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "we've verified Mr. Powell's identification, his mortgage documentation, his grocery receipt, and physical residence. This is his house." Karen blinked. "No. That's not possible. I saw her just last year." Claire stepped forward. "Julie moved away 2 years ago, Karen. She's in Whispering Pines Retirement Village over on Westbrook Road. She even sent us a holiday card from there." Karen turned in a slow circle, as though searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. "They're all lying," she mumbled. "All of them. You people, you're covering for him." At this point, her little dog was trembling in her arms, no longer barking, just squirming, like even it wanted out of the spotlight. I spoke up. "Officers, I'd like to file a report for false emergency reporting and harassment." Karen's eyes went wide. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. "This didn't have to become a public circus. But you made it one. You accused me of breaking into my own home. Of stealing groceries I purchased. And you weaponized the police against me." Officer Washington nodded slowly. "We'll need to process this carefully, Mr. Powell. But yes, this qualifies for a formal complaint." Karen gasped. "I'm the neighborhood watch coordinator. I was doing my job." "Since when?" Robert said, lifting an eyebrow. "We don't have a neighborhood watch coordinator." Karen hesitated. "Since the last HOA meeting." "There was no meeting last month," Claire said flatly. "You weren't even at the one in February." Karen's face twitched. She took a step back, wobbling slightly. "I was just trying to keep us safe." Robert turned to the officers. "With all due respect, officers, this woman has been making false claims since the day she moved in. She once called animal control on my dog for barking at a squirrel. And she reported my daughter's slumber party as suspicious activity," Mrs. Garcia added. "Pizza and frozen too," her teenage son added helpfully from the crowd. "Terrifying stuff. I think the only danger she's protecting us from is not knowing which neighbors she hates this week," muttered someone else, drawing muffled laughter from the group. Karen's head swiveled like she'd been hit. She was losing control of the narrative, and she knew it. Her voice grew shrill. "You're all turning on me? After everything I've done for this street? I'm the reason the community garden didn't get torn down." "That was the county zoning board, Karen," Claire replied, unimpressed. Officer Washington sighed and motioned me aside. "Mr. Powell, may I speak with you privately?" I nodded and followed him a few feet away. "You have every right to file charges," he said. "But, if you're open to alternatives, there may be a path that avoids the courts." I blinked. "Like what?" "We've seen cases where a restorative resolution actually leads to long-term change," he said. "Apology, community service, education, reparation, not punishment, but accountability." I thought about that. I didn't want Karen arrested. I wanted her to learn. So I stepped forward and said, "Mrs. Hollingsworth, I'm going to offer you a choice." She flinched at the formality of it. "You can face formal charges for making a false police report, or you can agree to 4 terms. She stared at me, arms tight around her dog like a shield. "Terms?" "First," I said, "a public apology. Right here, right now. Not just to me, but to this entire neighborhood. She looked around nervously at the assembled crowd. Second, I continued, a $5,000 donation to the youth center on Elmhurst and Bay, specifically their STEM program. Third, your resignation from any neighborhood position you've claimed to hold. And fourth, enrollment in the city's Diversity and Inclusion Community Workshop series. You've got to be kidding. I'm not, I said calmly. This isn't about vengeance. It's about growth. Take the offer, or I file today. A hush fell over the lawn. Karen looked around. Her husband Gerald wasn't there. No allies. No HOA backing. No more dog barking. Just her, and the truth. Her lip trembled. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. I'll do it. I raised an eyebrow. All of it? She gave a jerky nod. Yes. Let's hear it, then. She took a shaky breath and said, I apologize, for calling the police without cause. For assuming you didn't belong here. For making things worse. I tilted my head. And? Her eyes met mine, finally, genuinely. And for making assumptions based on appearances. A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the crowd. Claire gave a small nod. Robert clapped once. Others murmured their approval. That'll do, I said, quietly. I accept. By the time the officers left, contact info collected and report documented, the energy had shifted. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering, exchanging glances. Not at me anymore, but at her. Karen walked home alone. Her posture crumbled. Her little dog no longer barked. Just trembled. That night, I thought things might finally go quiet. But it was only the beginning. Because the next day, Karen's apology went viral. There's an old saying that a public mess deserves a public cleanup. Karen Hollingsworth had made a scene in front of the entire block, calling the police on me for nothing more than the crime of carrying groceries into my own home. So when she agreed to my terms instead of facing criminal charges, I meant every word when I asked her to apologize publicly. But what I didn't expect was that her apology, awkward, reluctant, and barely above a whisper, would set off a chain reaction I couldn't have predicted. It started with the impromptu barbecue. Claire and Robert Bennett, the steady, generous couple who lived across the street, didn't let the evening end with drama. Once the officers left and Karen scuttled back to her house at 124 Elmhurst, Claire turned to me with a warm smile. Why don't you bring those steaks over to our place, she said. We were about to light the grill anyway. Let's turn this night around. Within 20 minutes, the tone of the street transformed. Neighbors disappeared briefly into their homes, returning with side dishes, bottles of wine, and folding chairs. Aidan Johnson helped gather the groceries Karen's dog had knocked over. Mrs. Garcia brought out a tiramisu she'd made for her book club. Before I knew it, the Bennett's backyard had turned into a neighborhood dinner party. As we shared food and laughter under string lights, something beautiful unfolded, real connection. The kind of warmth and acceptance I hadn't felt since moving in. I learned that Mr. Halverson had marched for civil rights in the 60s, that Claire played the cello in a community orchestra, and that Robert had grown up in the same town as my mother. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were beginning to become a community. Later that evening, just as dessert was being passed around, Karen reappeared. She stood awkwardly at the edge of the backyard, holding a check in one hand and a foil-covered plate in the other. Her hair was down now, her demeanor subdued. I wanted to deliver this in person, she said, offering me the check. $5,000. For the youth center. I took it, checked the amount, and nodded. And these are lemon bars. County Fair recipe. I thought maybe, they could be a peace offering. The group fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I peeled back the foil. The lemon bars looked flawless, sugar-dusted and neatly cut. "Thank you," I said, simply. "Would you like to join us?" Karen blinked. "I don't think that would be appropriate. I just wanted to apologize again." She turned to the group. Her voice shook. "To all of you. I was wrong. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. And I put someone in danger who didn't deserve it. I'm sorry." There was a pause, then Mrs. Garcia stepped forward. "The youth center is lucky to have that land, Karen." "Thank you." Karen nodded, eyes shining. She left without another word. But the story didn't end there. 3 days later, the apology post went live. A neighbor sent me the link. It was a lengthy blog post on a site called Neighborhood Watch Warriors, a platform where suburban watchdogs shared their complaints and concerns. The post was titled, "How I Became What I Claimed to Protect Against." Written by Karen herself. It was shockingly honest. She recounted the entire incident in detail, how she saw me unloading groceries, how she assumed I didn't belong, how she fabricated the story about Julie Thornton. She admitted to racial bias. She wrote about the public humiliation and the night in the Bennett's yard. And she ended with something that struck me: I believed I was protecting my community. But I was harming it. The real danger wasn't a stranger moving in, it was me, refusing to see someone as a neighbor simply because he didn't look like me. Then she linked to the youth center's donation page. The blog post went viral. Within 24 hours, the youth center had received more than $20,000 in new donations. Messages poured in from across the country, some praising her courage, others condemning her racism. And somehow, amid the digital firestorm, something changed in how our neighborhood saw itself. People began talking. Not just about Karen's mistake, but about their own unconscious biases. Mr. Halverson stopped me one morning to share how he once mistook a Latino mail carrier for a loiterer. Mrs. Garcia invited me to speak at her book club about systemic bias. Then came the press. News vans rolled into Elmhurst. Local reporters interviewed neighbors. The story even made the national news for a day. But what impressed me most was what didn't happen. Karen didn't hide. She didn't backpedal. She kept attending the city's diversity workshops. She kept her word. 2 weeks after the barbecue, I was invited to speak at a town hall about restorative justice. I told our story, all of it. And when I finished, the applause was thunderous. Redemption? Maybe. Or maybe just the first step toward something bigger than any of us expected. A few weeks after the lot transfer, I thought things might finally quiet down. But change, it turns out, doesn't like to stay boxed inside one neighborhood. It started with a knock at my door. Not Karen. Not a neighbor. Officer Washington, off-duty, in jeans and a polo shirt, holding a folder. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said. "Not at all," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." We sat in the living room. He handed me the folder. "The department's launching a pilot program," he said. "Inspired by what happened here. Restorative community intervention, where appropriate. We want you involved." The chief signed off this morning. Inside the folder were documents for a citywide initiative. I was stunned. Officer Washington leaned back. "Turns out, your neighborhood isn't the only one struggling with how to hold people accountable without destroying them. Your idea hit a nerve." I didn't speak right away. Not out of hesitation, but gravity. What we had started on Elmhurst was about to become something much bigger. Later that week, I attended the first planning meeting at City Hall. A round table of police officers, educators, social workers, and yes, victims and offenders who had been through similar neighborhood conflicts. The energy was cautious, but curious. They asked me to speak. I shared our story. Not the headlines, not the blog post. The story. The fear. The hesitation. The choice to respond with purpose instead of fury. I talked about what it meant to turn confrontation into connection. About how hard grace can be. When I finished, one of the educators, a woman named Dr. Eunice Adler, said simply, "This might be the most hopeful thing I've heard in years." The program was greenlit the next month. Meanwhile, back on Elmhurst, things continued to evolve. The youth center began construction on the new wing. Local businesses offered donations. A tech startup donated refurbished laptops. And I found myself spending more and more evenings mentoring high school students, kids who reminded me of myself when I was just beginning to dream of something bigger. The blog post Karen had written kept circulating. Then came the emails. First from surrounding towns. Then other states. People reaching out to ask how they could replicate what we'd done. People admitting their own missteps. Parents who'd shared the story with their children. Church groups. Book clubs. Educators. I started a side project, an online platform called Bridges Not Walls. A place where communities could share resources, templates, and personal stories about handling neighborhood disputes through dialogue and accountability. Within weeks, it had hundreds of contributors. Karen, to her credit, kept showing up. Quietly, consistently. She attended every single workshop. She never asked to speak at events. She just helped. Set up chairs. Served coffee. Took notes. And then she did something that surprised everyone. She wrote a second blog post. Titled, "What I Thought I Knew." This one was less about the past and more about what she was learning in the present. About the discomfort of confronting her own upbringing. About learning to sit with shame without running from it. And about realizing that being quiet isn't the same as being safe. She ended it with this. "I used to think I was protecting my neighborhood by watching everything. But now I realize the real protection comes from seeing everyone. Fully." It went even more viral than the first. By now, she had a new kind of audience, people who had once been her allies on the Neighborhood Watch Warriors blog, now wondering if they too had been part of the problem. Some called her a sellout. But many, surprisingly many, echoed her journey. The comments were filled with similar confessions, stories of eye-opening moments, small steps forward. The impact was undeniable. So was the backlash. A few angry HOA members tried to call an emergency vote to bar any resident from speaking publicly on behalf of the neighborhood. The irony was thick. But the vote failed, narrowly. Claire Bennett stood up at that meeting and said, "We can't pretend Elmhurst didn't change. What happened here was messy, yes, but it was honest. We should be proud that we're not hiding from that." The room fell silent. The motion was dropped. Soon after, I was asked to speak at a state summit on community-led justice. It felt surreal. Just 2 months ago, I was on my front porch with grocery bags and a headache. Now I was in a conference center ballroom shaking hands with city leaders and civil rights attorneys. But even with all the growth and visibility, I stayed grounded by what mattered most, the young people at the youth center. One night, after a mentoring session, a high school senior named Terrence walked up to me. "Mr. Powell," he said. "Do you think people really change?" I considered the question. Then said, "I think people can change. If they want it enough. If they're willing to be uncomfortable long enough." He nodded. My dad read Karen's blog. It's the first time I've seen him cry. That night, I cried too. Not because of Karen. But because of the ripple. Because of Terrence. Because sometimes, the smallest moment becomes the start of something that moves through the world like water, soft, but unstoppable. By the end of the month, Bridges Not Walls had nearly 10,000 users. And Elmhurst? Well, we weren't perfect. But we were awake. Conversations happened on porches instead of behind blinds. Our HOA meetings got real. Our community garden saw more volunteers. Our kids asked better questions. Karen eventually moved. Not in shame, but to Portland, to be closer to her sister. Before she left, she stopped by one last time. "I wanted you to know," she said, "I enrolled in a master's program in conflict resolution." I smiled. "That's fitting." She paused, then asked, "Do you forgive me?" I looked at her, not the woman who'd called the police on me, but the woman who'd called herself out. "I already did." She nodded, tears forming. "Thank you." We hugged. A brief, human moment. No spectacle. No lemon bars. Just two people who had both changed. As she walked away, I realized that what had started with a false 911 call had become a movement. Not because of outrage, but because of choice. We chose not to escalate. We chose to face each other. And in doing so, we found something rare, not perfection, but possibility. 3 months after that first confrontation on my front porch, life in Elmhurst had settled into a new rhythm. The quiet wasn't the kind that buries tension. It was the kind that follows real conversations. A peaceful hum of growth. One Thursday afternoon, I was helping Emma Bennett, Claire and Robert's daughter, with her pre-algebra homework at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. Emma jumped up, glad for the excuse to take a break from variables. "I'll get it," she called. She opened the door, then turned back with wide eyes. "Mr. Powell, it's for you." At the door stood a woman in a navy blouse and jeans, her hair gently curled at her shoulders. Her posture was relaxed but purposeful. It took me a moment to recognize her. It was Karen. Not the Karen who once stormed across my lawn with a barking dog and wild accusations. Not the one who held up a plate of lemon bars like a peace treaty. This Karen looked different. Not just in style or tone, but in presence. There was a quiet humility to her now. "Hi, Desmond," she said. "Can I come in for a moment?" I nodded and stepped aside. She held out a large manila envelope. "I wanted to give this to you personally. It's a record of the land transfer to the youth center. Signed, notarized, and filed. It's officially theirs." I took the envelope, and she added, "They're planning to break ground next spring. A garden and a basketball court." "That's wonderful," I said. "They'll make good use of it." She gave a small smile. "That's what I hope." Karen glanced around the kitchen and noticed the math books on the table. I didn't mean to interrupt. "Not at all," I replied. Emma was probably praying for an excuse. Karen chuckled lightly, then turned serious. "I wanted to say something else," she said. "One more thing before I leave town." "You're moving?" She nodded. "Next week. I'm heading to Portland. My sister lives out there. I've enrolled in a master's program, conflict resolution." I raised my eyebrows. "That's perfect, honestly." "I hope so," she said. Then she hesitated. "I've been working on something in therapy. Something they said I should say out loud." She looked me in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Desmond. Truly. For everything. For assuming. For endangering you. For not seeing you." I let the silence hold for a moment. Then I said, "I appreciate that, Karen. And I accept it." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. As she turned to leave, she paused one last time. "Thank you. For not crushing me when you could have. For giving me a chance to change. You gave yourself that chance, I said. I just held up the mirror. After she left, Emma wandered back into the kitchen and sat down. Was that the lady from the grocery thing? She asked. I nodded. She didn't look like I expected, Emma said. People don't always stay who they were, I replied. Sometimes they grow. Emma squinted at her textbook. Can people's brains grow too? Because this math is impossible. I laughed and sat beside her. Let's take it one equation at a time. That evening, the neighborhood came together again, no cameras, no reporters, just a backyard gathering at the Bennetts. The kids played flashlight tag while the adults shared stories over grilled vegetables and local wine. Mrs. Garcia brought her famous cinnamon cobbler. Aidan Johnson helped his dad set up speakers for music. When someone mentioned Karen's move, it wasn't met with snide remarks or relief. It was quiet reflection. Claire offered a toast, not to her, exactly, but to second chances, good neighbors, and the courage to admit when we're wrong. We raised our glasses. Not in triumph, but in solidarity. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the patio lights dimmed, I stood on my porch with a glass of Macallan. I looked down the block, where just months ago, I was a stranger in my own driveway. Now I was home. Karen had called the police on me that day. But she hadn't destroyed me. If anything, her call had awakened something far greater than either of us could have imagined. A community. A movement. And a reminder, true justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about possibility. In the quiet aftermath of conflict, we often discover the most powerful truths about ourselves and those around us. The story of Desmond and Karen in Elmhurst isn't just about a false accusation or a neighborhood dispute, it's a profound reminder that redemption begins where judgment ends. At its core, this narrative teaches us that people are capable of change, not because they're forced to, but because they're given the opportunity. It's easy to respond to injustice with outrage, to answer pain with punishment. But it takes wisdom, and courage, to choose restoration over retaliation. When Desmond chose to hold up a mirror instead of raising his voice, he didn't just protect his dignity, he created the conditions for real transformation. Karen's journey, uncomfortable as it was, proved that even those deeply rooted in bias can evolve, when they're held accountable with grace. And the community? They didn't crumble under conflict, they came together, redefined their values, and strengthened their bonds. In a world so quick to cancel and condemn, this story reminds us that second chances, when met with sincerity, can rebuild bridges once thought burned. It's not just about who was right or wrong, it's about what we choose to do with those moments that reveal who we truly are. So as you reflect on this story, ask yourself. In your own life, are there places where understanding could replace anger? Are there conversations you've been avoiding that could be the start of healing? Remember, growth doesn't happen in silence. It happens in the messy, vulnerable space of truth. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and think a little deeper about justice, humanity, or even your own neighborhood, please, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we uncover lessons that change lives.